ahead, full of quiet moments and gentle things. And now, let's dive into today's story together. At a party with my husband's friends, I tried to kiss him while we were dancing. He pulled away and said, "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." Everyone laughed. Then he added, "You don't even meet my standards. Stay away from me." The laughter grew louder. I smiled as if it didn't hurt, but when I finally responded, the room went dead silent. Some words hurt, but mine cut deeper. Remember, when someone asks what you do, just say you work at the hospital. Preston coached me as I zipped myself into the designer emerald green dress he had picked out for me, though he hadn't complimented me once. Don't mention you head the cardiac unit. These people don't want to hear about medical stuff at parties. He rehearsed me again, the exact same way he did before every gathering with his investment banking circle, scripting my responses to ensure I never outshined him. 5 years ago, he used to brag to everyone that he had married a surgeon. Now, he treated my career like an embarrassing secret that might accidentally slip out if I wasn't careful enough. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me today. If you believe that public humiliation in a marriage is never acceptable and that everyone deserves respect, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps reach more people who need to hear these stories. I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, adjusting the emerald fabric, which cost more than most people's monthly rent. The dress was beautiful, I suppose, but it felt like a costume for a play where I had forgotten all my lines. Behind me, Preston continued his grooming ritual, checking his collar for the 17th time. Yes, I counted. It was easier to focus on his obsessive adjustments than to think about how we had gotten here. "The Lockwoods will be there," he said, continuing to scroll through his phone. "Remember, he's an M&A, not private equity. Don't mix that up again. And his wife's name is Vanessa, not Valerie." I wanted to tell him that I had been calling her Vanessa for 3 years, that the incident with Valerie had been his mistake at last year's holiday party. But corrections were no longer part of our script. Instead, I watched him transform in the mirror. Every adjustment to his appearance was another step away from the man who once waited outside the hospital with coffee and flowers after my grueling surgeries. "I saved a 1-2-year-old boy today," I said quietly, testing the waters. His mitral valve was— "That's great, honey," Preston interrupted, not taking his eyes off his screen. "But nobody wants to hear about blood and procedures over cocktails. It makes people uncomfortable. Stick to light topics. The weather, travel plans, maybe that new downtown restaurant everyone's talking about." The weather. 4 years of medical school, 5 years of surgical residency, 2 years heading the cardiac unit of one of the top hospitals in the country. And he wanted me to discuss cloud formations with investment bankers, who probably couldn't even locate their own pulse points. My phone buzzed with a text from my surgical team. The boy was stable, already asking when he could play soccer again. His mother had cried when I told her the surgery was a success. Those tears meant more to me than any invitation to this party ever could, but mentioning them would violate Preston's carefully constructed rules of engagement. "Also," Preston added, finally looking at me through the mirror instead of directly, Jonathan asked about our plans for the Hamilton Charity Gala next month. I told him we'd take a table. It's $250,000, but it's important for visibility. $250,000 for visibility. Meanwhile, the pediatric ward needed new monitoring equipment that the hospital board deemed too expensive at $150,000. I had planned to make a personal donation, but apparently our money was already allocated for Preston's networking opportunities. "Ready?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. He was already heading for the door, expecting me to follow like a well-trained accessory. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Preston reviewed names and details about the night's guests, treating me like an actress who needed a rehearsal before a performance. "Timothy Morrison closed that pharmaceutical deal last week. Congratulate him, but don't ask for details. And avoid Megan Whitfield if she's drinking. She gets chatty about their marriage problems." I nodded at the appropriate intervals while thinking about my patient's mother, how she had held my hands and blessed me in 3 different languages. That was real. That had substance. This elevator ride to another party, where I would pretend to be less than I was, this was the performance. The valet took our car with practiced efficiency. Preston's hand moved to my lower back as we entered Jonathan's high-rise building. Not out of affection, but for positioning. He did this at every public event, marking his territory while keeping me at the exact distance that suggested togetherness without any real intimacy. "Remember, he whispered as we waited for the penthouse elevator. Smile more tonight. You looked miserable at the last party. These are important people, Audrey. My career depends on these relationships. His career? Not ours. Never ours anymore. The elevator opened directly into Jonathan's Chicago penthouse, and I watched Preston transform completely. His shoulders squared, his smile activated with practiced precision. His voice dropped to that confident pitch he thought made him sound more authoritative. Jonathan, he called out, dropping my lower back to shake hands with an enthusiasm that would vanish the moment we got home. Preston. And Audrey. Jonathan added my name as an afterthought, his eyes already drifting past me to see who else had arrived. This was my role now. The afterthought, the plus one, the silent partner in a partnership that had become anything but equal. Vanessa Lockwood glided over with air kisses and champagne. Audrey, darling, you look stunning. That dress is divine. Preston has such exquisite taste. Even my appearance was no longer my own achievement. The dress I wore, the shoes I walked in, the careful way I had styled my hair, all credited to my husband's choices, as if I were a doll he had dressed up for display. Thank you, I replied with the measured tone I had learned kept conversations brief. Too much enthusiasm invited follow-up questions. Too little marked me as difficult. The balancing act was exhausting. Audrey works at the hospital. Preston chimed in smoothly when Jonathan asked what I had been up to lately. Just works at the hospital. Not heads the cardiothoracic surgery unit. Not saved a child's life today. Not makes double my salary keeping people alive. Just works at the hospital, as if I filed paperwork or delivered meal trays. I stood there in my expensive dress, holding champagne I didn't want, smiling at people who looked right through me instead of at me, and I made a decision. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I would try one last time to connect with the man I married, to find some remnant of the person who had once been proud of my achievements instead of threatened by them. One last attempt to salvage what we had built before it collapsed entirely. If it failed, and a part of me already knew it would, then at least I would know I had tried everything before whatever came next. The conversation around me shifted to quarterly projections and market volatility, terms that floated like background noise as I watched the room transform. Someone had dimmed the lights, and the music shifted from upbeat cocktail jazz to something slower, more intimate. Jonathan took Vanessa's hand with practiced ease, leading her to the cleared space near the balcony doors. Justin pulled Natalie close, whispering something that made her laugh, and rest her head on his shoulder. I stood on the edge of their happiness, holding my empty wine glass like a prop I had forgotten how to use. The couples moved together with such natural synchronization, such obvious comfort in each other's presence. When had Preston and I lost that? Did we ever really have it? A waiter passed by with a tray. I traded my empty glass for a fresh one, drinking it faster than I should have. The bubbles burned slightly, giving me something to focus on besides the growing ache in my chest. Across the room, Preston was deep in discussion with Cameron and some client whose name I had already forgotten. His hands moved animatedly as he explained something that made them all nod like synchronized puppets. Then, the piano intro to a song I recognized filled the space. It was similar to the one that had played at our wedding reception at the Drake Hotel 5 years ago. Not the exact song, but close enough to make my breath hitch. That night, Preston had pulled me onto the empty dance floor at 2 a.m., both of us barefoot and drunk on champagne and possibilities. We're going to have such a beautiful life, he had whispered against my ear. Kids, a house with a backyard. Sunday mornings reading the paper on the porch. Everything. Audrey, we're going to have it all. The memory pushed me forward before I could second-guess myself. My hand found Preston's elbow, the fabric of his jacket smooth and expensive beneath my fingers. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Cameron looked at me with thinly veiled irritation. The client looked confused, and Preston's jaw twitched in that specific way that meant I had broken protocol. Dance with me. The words came out smaller than I intended, more a plea than an invitation. Preston's eyes flicked over his colleagues, calculating the social math of the moment. Refusing would look bad. Accepting would interrupt his networking. I could see him weighing his options, finding the path of least resistance. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Duty calls. Duty. That was what I had become. His hand on my waist felt perfunctory, positioned at that exact distance that suggested marriage without intimacy. My hand on his shoulder met fabric that might as well have been armor. We started to move, but it was mechanical, like two strangers following instructions in a dance class, rather than a married couple sharing a moment. The Peterson deal looks promising, he said, his eyes focused on a spot over my shoulder, probably tracking who was talking to whom, what connections were being made without him. That's good, I murmured, trying to pull him closer, trying to find some echo of the man who had once danced with me until dawn. His body resisted, maintaining that careful distance. Everything about him radiated impatience, the tapping of his fingers against my waist, the way his weight shifted as if already planning his exit. His constant surveillance of the room meant I wasn't worth his undivided attention, not even for one dance. Around us, other couples swayed with easy intimacy. Vanessa had her arms wrapped around Jonathan's neck, her shoes abandoned somewhere, laughing at something he had whispered. Natalie and Justin barely moved, just holding each other as if the rest of the room had disappeared. Even the older couples, the ones married for decades, moved with a comfortable familiarity that squeezed my chest tight. The wine, the music, and the memory of better times created a moment of dangerous hope. Maybe if I could just cross this distance, just remind him of what we used to have. I watched Vanessa kiss Jonathan's cheek. I saw Justin brush Natalie's hair back with gentle fingers. I noticed how every other couple seemed to exist in their own private bubble of affection. I leaned in. It wasn't meant to be dramatic or passionate, just a simple kiss. The kind married couples share at parties when the music is soft and the lighting is forgiving. The kind that says, "We're still here. Still us." Despite everything, Preston pulled away with such violence that several people turned to look, his face twisted with genuine disgust, as if I had tried to force something toxic into his mouth. And then, loud enough for everyone to hear, clear enough that the music couldn't mask it, he said the words that would loop in my mind forever. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." The laughter was immediate and cruel. Jonathan nearly spilled his drink. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth in delighted shock. Cameron actually clapped, as if Preston had just delivered the punchline everyone had been waiting for. The sound crashed over me in waves. Every laugh was a separate wound. Every chuckle, a confirmation that I was the joke. I had always been the joke. But Preston wasn't finished. The laughter fed something in him, validating whatever narrative he had been building about us, about me. He raised his voice, ensuring everyone could hear the encore. "You don't even meet my standards. Stay away from me." More laughter. Someone whistled. A phone appeared in someone's hand. Were they recording this? My face burned, but my body had gone ice cold, frozen in the center of their amusement like a specimen pinned down for examination. The room spun slightly not from the champagne, but from the sudden, devastating clarity that washed over me. Every red flag I had ignored organized itself into a parade of truth. The anniversary dinner he canceled for an urgent client meeting that his Instagram later revealed never happened. The separate bedrooms during stressful quarters that somehow stretched into 8 months. The way his clothes sometimes smelled of a perfume I didn't wear. The mysterious charges on our credit card he explained away as client entertainment. The way he stopped saying "I love you," except as a response, never initiating it. I stood there in my expensive dress, surrounded by laughter that sounded like breaking glass, and I understood with perfect clarity that I had been doing CPR on something that had been dead for years. I had been so focused on trying to revive what we had that I didn't notice the corpse had started to rot. Something shifted inside me, a tectonic plate sliding into a new position. The humiliation was still there, burning like acid. But beneath it, something else emerged. Something cold and calculating. Something that understood the difference between being hurt and being destroyed. They were still laughing, but I wasn't broken anymore. My smile started small, just a slight curve at the corners of my mouth. Not the polite smile I had perfected for these gatherings. Not the diplomatic expression I wore at hospital board meetings. This was something entirely different, something welling up from a much deeper place. And I watched as it made the laughter around me falter and die, like a flame suddenly deprived of oxygen. "You know what, Preston?" My voice came out steady, clinical. The same tone I used when explaining terminal diagnoses to families. "You are absolutely right. I don't meet your standards." His smile widened, mistaking my agreement for surrender. Cameron chuckled and slapped him on the back. Jonathan raised his glass in a mocking salute. They thought they were witnessing my final humiliation, my acceptance of his public rejection. Your standards require someone who doesn't know about the Fitzgerald account. The words dropped like surgical instruments onto a steel tray. Preston's expression shifted, the air of superiority draining out of him as if someone had pulled a plug. His eyes darted to Cameron, then back to me. The room had grown quiet enough for me to hear the ice settling in someone's glass. What are you talking about? Preston's voice had lost its confident pitch. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, the device suddenly feeling like a weapon I had been concealing all night. Your standards need someone who hasn't spent the last 3 months documenting every single discrepancy in our accounts. Someone who didn't hire a forensic accountant when she noticed $250,000 moving through shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Vanessa leaned forward, her perfectly contoured face showing the first genuine emotion I had ever seen from her. Jonathan set his drink down with a sharp click against the marble counter. The atmosphere in the room had pivoted from cruel amusement to electric tension. "This is ridiculous, Preston," Cameron said. But his voice cracked on the last syllable. I scrolled through my phone screen with deliberate slowness, letting every motion build the tension. Here is the audit report. Shell company registration documents. Wire transfers dated on the exact same days you claimed to be at conferences that fun fact you never actually attended. I turned the screen toward the crowd, watching them lean in like moths to a flame. "Oh, Cameron, you'll love this one." Tuesday, March 15th, 3:47 p.m. Should I play the recording of the two of you discussing how to destroy evidence before the quarterly review? Cameron's face went from tanned to ashen gray in seconds. You can't do that. I hit play. Preston's voice filled the room through the phone's speaker. Tinny, but unmistakable. We need to wipe everything before Donovan checks the books. Transfer it through the subsidiary, then close it out. Make it look like a client error. Someone dropped a glass. The sound of it shattering against the marble perfectly punctuated Preston's recorded confession. Jonathan stumbled backward, his hand searching for the wall to steady himself. The Fitzgerald account. That was my father's retirement portfolio, Jonathan breathed out. Your standards, I continued, my voice slicing through the chaos that was beginning to brew, also requires someone who doesn't know about Haley. Who is Haley? Natalie's voice was sharp, but she wasn't asking me. She had turned to Justin, whose face had suddenly gone pale. The 2-3-year-old intern at Justin's brokerage, I said, watching the dominoes begin their inevitable cascade. The one who needed that marketing position so badly. The one Preston has been visiting at her apartment every Thursday. Justin's cousin, actually. Funny how these things connect. Natalie's hand cracked across Justin's face before he could respond. The slap echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Your cousin? The one you said needed career help? Your standards need someone who doesn't read text messages. I scrolled through my phone, finding the screenshots I had saved. Like this one from 3 hours ago. Can't wait for this boring party to be over so I can see you tomorrow. Audrey is so desperate it's embarrassing. Or this one from last Tuesday. My wife is pathetic. She actually thinks I'm working late. Vanessa had moved closer, reading over my shoulder. Oh my God, she whispered, then spoke louder, turning to Jonathan. The pills. The pills going missing from our medicine cabinet. What pills? Jonathan asked, his confusion seemingly genuine. The little blue ones. Vanessa's voice was rising. You said you didn't need them. But they kept disappearing. And now. She turned to Preston. You were at our house last week for the game. You used our bathroom. Preston lunged toward me then, his hand reaching for my phone, but I sidestepped him with the same precision I used navigating around operating tables. Years of surgical training had taught me economy of movement. He stumbled past me, catching himself on an accent table that wobbled under his weight. The Whitman portfolio, I announced to the room, which had become a frozen tableau of horror. Check your statements. Everyone really check those spectacular returns Preston has been showing you. Creative math. The money has been siphoned off to accounts in Panama. The FBI knows everything. You're lying! Preston's voice had gone high-pitched, desperate. I pulled up another document on my phone. Federal prosecutors disagree. This is the confirmation that arrest warrants will be served on Monday morning at your firm, during the partners' meeting specifically. Agent Carter thought the timing would be particularly effective. The room exploded. Jonathan was screaming about his father's money. Vanessa was shrieking at Jonathan about the pills and asking how he could not know. Natalie was demanding Justin explain his role in everything while he stammered out denials. Cameron had his phone out, typing frantically, probably trying to move money, or warn someone, or book a flight to a country without an extradition treaty. Amidst it all, Preston stood frozen in the center of the chaos he had created. His carefully constructed world collapsing around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, he had no script, no charming deflection, no audience ready to laugh at his cruelty. "Oh, and Preston?" I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Your mother knows everything. Josephine called me last week after her accountant found discrepancies in the pension fund you manage for her. We had a very interesting conversation about where your father's retirement money actually went." His legs seemed to give out. He sank into one of Jonathan's designer chairs, burying his head in his hands. The man who had stood in the center of the room comparing me to a dog 5 minutes ago had been reduced to something small and pathetic, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The sound of my heels on the marble was the only noise as I walked toward the door. Every step was measured and deliberate. The crowd parted, some staring at me in shock, others with something that might have been respect or fear. At the penthouse entrance, I turned back one last time. The scene was perfect in its destruction. Trust fund kings and queens reduced to screaming accusations at each other, the careful social architecture they had built crumbling, as every revelation exposed another lie, another betrayal, another crime. And in the center of it all, my husband No, my soon-to-be ex-husband sat with his face in his hands, finally understanding what it felt like to be stripped bare and humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to him. I stepped through the penthouse door and into the hallway, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm against the marble floor. Behind me, the chaos raged on. Voices raised in accusation, furniture scraping as people moved, Vanessa's shrill demands for answers piercing through it all. Ahead, there was only silence and the gleaming elevator doors at the end of the hall. My hand was steady when I pressed the call button, though I could feel the adrenaline beginning to crash, leaving something hollow in its wake. The elevator arrived with a soft chime that felt far too cheerful for what had just transpired. As I stepped inside, Vanessa's voice suddenly called out behind me. "Audrey, wait!" She stood in the penthouse doorway, her makeup smeared, holding something in her hand. The necklace, a diamond piece she had been showing off all night. "This necklace?" she said, her voice trembling. "You said it was bought with funds from the Sherman Trust. Check the purchase date against the withdrawal records. March 28th. $210,000. The words came out clinical, factual. "You might want to take it off before the asset freeze hits on Monday. They'll consider it evidence." She ripped the necklace off so fast the clasp broke, diamonds scattering across the marble like broken promises. The elevator doors closed as she scrambled to gather them. And suddenly, I was alone in that small space. 30 seconds. That was what I gave myself. 30 seconds to shake. To feel the sheer magnitude of what I had just done. My hands trembled as I gripped the handrail. My legs were suddenly unsteady in heels that had carried me through 12-hour surgeries, but now felt entirely inadequate for this moment. 28 seconds. 29. 30. I straightened my spine, pulled out my phone, and texted my lawyer, Meredith. "It's done. Everything is in motion. File the papers on Monday morning." The reply was immediate. "Security footage. They'll have everything. Make sure Carter knows." The elevator opened into the lobby, where the doorman nodded politely, oblivious to the destruction happening 44 floors above. Outside, the valet brought my car around. I had driven separately, knowing somehow that I would need my own escape route. The drive home to the suburbs was automatic, muscle memory navigating while my mind replayed every moment, every word, every expression on Preston's face as his world fell apart. Our townhouse was dark against the streetlights, looking exactly as it had when we left 3 hours ago, though everything had changed. I parked in the garage and sat for a moment, staring at Preston's golf clubs mounted on the wall, his mountain bike he never used, the tool set he had never opened, props in a performance of a life he wanted people to think he lived. Inside, I moved with purpose. Box after box came up from the basement storage room. The good ones we had saved from wedding gifts, sturdy and clean. His diploma from Booth School of Business came off the wall first, the frame heavier than expected, the glass reflecting my face back like an accusation. Into the box it went, followed by his collection of cufflinks arranged in their velvet case, each pair a gift from clients whose money he had been stealing. My phone vibrated continuously, Preston's name flashing repeatedly. I let it ring as I packed his suits, each one pressed and hanging in protective bags, his polished shoes paired up, the watch his father had given him at graduation. I held it for a moment, remembering how proud he had been, how he had shown it to everyone at dinner that night. His father, whose pension fund Preston had been draining. A text interrupted. Audrey, please let me explain. Then another. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. And another. You ruined everything. My entire life. Followed by, I'll make you pay for this. Then, please come back. We can fix this. The emotional whiplash of his messages might have affected me once. Now, they were just evidence of a man thrashing around for any foothold as he fell. I found our wedding album in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath tax documents. The cover was ivory leather with our initials in gold. Inside, that woman in white smiled back at me, radiant with certainty about her future. Preston stood beside her, his hand on her waist, looking at her like she was all he ever wanted. When had that look changed? When had she become an accessory to be managed, rather than a partner to be cherished? The tears came then. Not for him or for us, but for her. That woman who had believed in forever. I sat on his office floor, surrounded by boxes of his life, and wept for the death of her naive faith in happy endings. My phone rang. Abigail's name flashed on the screen. I saw Vanessa's Instagram story, my sister said without preamble. It cut off in the middle of the scene, but there was screaming. Are you okay? You can come over. My voice sounded hoarse, unfamiliar. I'm already in the car. I'll be there in 3 hours from Madison. The next morning arrived gray and quiet. Abigail had shown up at 2 a.m. with a suitcase and a grocery bag, finding me asleep on the couch surrounded by boxes. She had covered me with a blanket and started making coffee, the smell pulling me from restless dreams about falling diamonds and marble floors. You have a meeting? She said, handing me a mug. Benjamin Carter, 9 a.m., Cafe Luna. I had forgotten I told her about it during our late-night planning session. Agent Carter was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a clear view of both exits. Occupational habits, I assumed. He stood up when he saw me. Professional, but not unkind. Dr. Lockwood? Soon to be Dr. Chen? Wait, my maiden name. Let's just say Dr. Audrey. I'll keep it simple. Dr. Audrey. I slid the flash drive across the table. 3 years of evidence compressed into a device smaller than my thumb. My mother noticed it first, I explained. She's a retired CPA, does our taxes as a favor. Small discrepancies that didn't match our reported income. I started documenting everything after that. Carter reviewed the files on his laptop, his expression growing more serious with each document. This is comprehensive. With what you revealed last night and this documentation, we have enough for federal indictments. Preston's assets will be frozen by noon. Jonathan Lockwood and Justin Coleman are now under investigation as well. And your immunity agreement is ironclad. You had no knowledge of the criminal activity when it began. You reported it as soon as you discovered it. And you're cooperating fully. You are protected. Back home, Abigail had rearranged the living room furniture, pushing Preston's chair into the garage and centering the couch I had bought before I met him. The one he had always complained about, too soft, too blue, too something. He hated this couch, I said, sinking into it. Remember when he made you skip Dad's 70th birthday? Abigail said suddenly. Said it was a critical client dinner. I nodded, remembering the disappointment in my father's voice when I called to cancel. I saw Instagram photos that night. He was at some club opening with that crowd. No clients. Just champagne and people who weren't you. We sat in comfortable silence. Sisters who had drifted apart during my marriage, now finding their way back. Abigail pulled out her laptop, and together we started making lists. Appointments with Meredith, financial advisors, therapy support, practical steps toward a life that would be entirely mine. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine streaming through the hospital windows. Abigail had left for Madison at dawn, promising to return next weekend, and I had driven to Northwestern Memorial Hospital on autopilot, my mind carefully compartmentalized between the surgery ahead and the knowledge of what was happening in the downtown office buildings. The patient was a 17-year-old local high school basketball player who had collapsed during practice with a previously undetected heart defect. His parents were in the waiting room, holding hands with the same desperate hope I had seen hundreds of times before. I focused on their faces as I explained the procedure, using their fear to anchor me to this moment, this purpose, this life that existed entirely separate from the destruction unfolding downtown. In the operating room, my team assembled with practiced efficiency. Dr. Chen, my senior resident, studied the monitors while taking notes. Nicole, my favorite surgical nurse, laid out the instruments with methodical precision. They moved around me like a well-rehearsed orchestra, oblivious that their conductor was internally tracking the time, knowing that at exactly 10 a.m., FBI agents would be walking into Donovan, Klein and Associates. Scalpel, I said, my voice steady through the surgical mask. The weight of the instrument in my hand felt like truth, something real and purposeful. Here in this sterile room, with its controlled environment and clear objectives, I could save a life while another life, the one I had built with Preston, officially ended. The surgery stretched into the third hour, when Dr. Chen, today, doctor, more focused, somehow. If only he knew that every precise cut, every careful suture, was a meditation against imagining Preston's face when the agents entered that conference room. The partners' meeting always started at 10 sharp. Donovan would be midway through his presentation on quarterly projections when the doors opened. The arrests would be public, visible, impossible to spin or explain away. 4 hours later, we encountered scar tissue, unexpected from an old injury the boy hadn't mentioned. I worked methodically, rerouting vessels with the same patience I had used to document 3 years of financial crimes. Every challenge in this surgery could be solved with skill and persistence. Unlike marriages built on lies, hearts could actually be fixed. 7 hours and 14 minutes after the first incision, I tied the final suture. The boy's heart beat strong and steady on the monitors, a rhythm that would carry him through decades of games and graduations, and all the life that Preston had tried to steal from retirees whose pensions he had looted. Beautiful work, Dr. Chen said as we scrubbed out. That kid is going to play college ball because of you. I pulled off my surgical cap, my hair damp with sweat, and checked my phone. 17 missed calls. 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters. The rest from various partners at Preston's brokerage. The news had broken. Back in my office, I had barely sat down when Vanessa appeared in my doorway. Gone was the perfectly groomed woman from Friday night's party. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple mall-bought dress, her face devoid of makeup except for tracks of mascara that suggested she had been crying in the car. "Can I come in?" Her voice was small, uncertain. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down carefully, as if she might break something, including herself. "Jonathan was arrested an hour ago," she said, the words tumbling out in an avalanche. They came to the house. The FBI had a warrant. They took everything: computers, files, even our phones. I had to borrow a neighbor's phone just to make calls. I waited, offering neither comfort nor condemnation, just space for her to continue. "Our accounts are frozen, all of them, even my personal account from before we got married. I can't access anything." She laughed, but it was hollow, broken. I went to 3 ATMs trying to get cash for gas. The bank teller looked at me with such pity when she explained the federal block. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, and I meant it. Whatever Vanessa's flaws were, she hadn't orchestrated the crimes. "Are you?" She looked up sharply. Because I laughed. "Friday night, when Preston said those things to you?" I laughed. "I've laughed for years, Audrey. At every party, every gathering, we all laughed. We called you the Ice Queen, the robot surgeon who didn't know how to have fun." The confession hung between us like a scalpel waiting to cut. "And the whole time," she continued, tears falling freely now, "Jonathan was stealing from his own father, from clients who trusted him. He was having affairs, multiple affairs. There's apparently a separate credit card I never knew about. The FBI agent asked me about trips to Vegas I didn't even know happened." She pulled a tissue from her purse, a regular purse, not the designer one she usually carried. "I was so busy feeling superior to you, laughing at your marriage, that I never looked at my own. We were living the exact same lie, except you were smart enough to see it." My office phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but the caller ID showed a name that made Vanessa flinch. Donovan, Klein and Associates. "They're all calling me," I said, Preston's former colleagues. Some fishing for information, trying to figure out their exposure. Others wanting to distance themselves, making sure I know they had no idea what was going on. "Did they know?" Vanessa asked. My cell phone buzzed with a text from a number I recognized. Preston's former assistant, Morgan. Dr. Audrey. I wanted you to know that we all knew about Haley. About the others, too. I'm so sorry we never said anything. He used to brag about it at happy hours. Said you were too focused on work to notice. Said he planned to leave you as soon as the Singapore deal closed. I have documentation if you need it for the divorce. I showed the text to Vanessa. She read it twice, her face crumpling. They all knew, she whispered. At every party, every dinner. They all knew our husbands were destroying us for sport. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number. Josephine, Preston's mother. I had been dreading this call. I need to take this, I told Vanessa. She stood up to leave, then paused in the doorway. Audrey, that strength they mocked you for? Don't lose it. It's the only reason you're still standing while the rest of us are falling apart. Josephine's voice was sharp when I answered, decades of upper crust breeding barely concealing her emotion. Audrey, I owe you an apology. No, hello, how are you? Straight to the point, as always. I was a terrible mother-in-law. I disapproved of your career. I thought you should focus on giving me grandchildren. I criticized you for not supporting Preston's ambitions properly. I said nothing, letting her continue. I hired an investigator 6 months ago, she said. The irregularities in the pension account were too obvious to ignore. I know everything. The affairs, the theft, the lies. I've already spoken to the federal prosecutor. I will testify against my own son if necessary. Josephine, he was trying to transfer the house into my name. Did you know that? To hide assets from potential lawsuits. The paperwork was prepared but never filed. He must have gotten distracted by his schemes. She paused. I raised him better than this. His father would be devastated. 3 months had passed since the arrests, and autumn had turned the Chicago skyline into a study of gray and gold. I was in my home office, the one Preston had never entered because it was too cluttered with medical journals composing an email to Malcolm, a financial blogger whose readership included every major brokerage in the city. The subject line read simply, documentation you should see. The attachments included court filings, arrest records, and a detailed timeline of the fraud I had compiled with my lawyer's blessing. Everything in the document was public record, but it was scattered across different databases. I had simply consolidated it into a devastating package that would pop up first whenever anyone searched Preston's name for the next 10 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Haley. We had kept in touch since I connected her with Paige Stanton, a lawyer specializing in cases against predatory executives. Lawsuit filed this morning. Emotional distress and pregnancy discrimination. Paige says the timing with your document release is perfect. Thank you, Audrey. I never expected to become an ally to my husband's mistress. But Haley had been a victim too. 23 years old. Told she was special. Promised a future that would never materialize. She was 7 months pregnant now, living with her parents in Michigan, rebuilding a life that Preston had derailed with his lies. That night, I attended the Chicago Children's Hospital Charity Gala, the exact same event where I had met Preston 6 years ago. Back then, I was the promising young surgeon he pursued. Now, I walked in alone, my presence creating ripples of conversation and whispers across the ballroom. Audrey, darling, Beverly Shin approached, her smile tight with curiosity. How brave of you to come. Brave. As if attending a charity event required courage. As if I was the one who should be hiding. The children's hospital needs support, regardless of personal circumstances, I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Throughout the night, I watched the social choreography unfold. Preston's former colleagues clustered in corners, their bodies angled away from anyone tainted by association with the scandal. Jonathan's former clients moved through the room like refugees, trying to establish new alliances while their frozen assets left them floundering. Near the silent auction tables, I overheard Cameron's wife, Lauren, talking to a small group of women. We had no idea, of course. Cameron barely knew Preston outside of work functions. I activated the recording app on my phone, holding it casually at my side. Please, another woman laughed. Cameron was at every boys' night. Remember that Vegas trip last year? My husband said they were practically celebrating something. Now we know what. The Singapore deal, Lauren admitted, her voice dropping. Cameron mentioned it once. Said Preston had found a creative solution to their funding problem. We should have known creative meant illegal. These admissions, These small acknowledgments of willful blindness were building blocks in a larger structure of accountability. My lawyer would be very interested in Cameron's prior knowledge of the Singapore deal. The divorce proceedings had begun 2 weeks earlier, and Preston had arrived with a strategy that was breathtaking in its audacity. Your Honor, Preston's lawyer had stated, Dr. Audrey made over $2 million last year. Mr. Preston's career has been destroyed by allegations, by federal indictments, my lawyer Meredith interrupted. Indictments based on evidence Dr. Audrey provided after discovering her husband's criminal activity. Meredith then produced a folder that made Preston visibly pale. We've uncovered cryptocurrency wallets in Mr. Preston's name containing approximately $1 million in Bitcoin, purchased over the last 18 months. Additionally, there is an art collection valued at $5 million, stored in a climate-controlled facility in Lake Forest under his mother's name, but paid for with marital assets. Every revelation was another precise, calculated cut. Preston's lawyer scrambled to respond, but Meredith wasn't finished. There's also the boat registration in Lake Geneva, the investment property in Aspen he never disclosed, and a safe deposit box containing gold coins and bearer bonds. By the end of that hearing, Preston's position had collapsed completely. He would walk away from the marriage with his criminal defense lawyer's fees, and nothing else. 2 days after the divorce hearing, Natalie Coleman contacted me. Justin's wife had discovered her own cache of evidence and wanted to compare notes. We met at a quiet cafe in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, two women united by the peculiar sisterhood of betrayal. Justin recorded everything, Natalie said, sliding a flash drive across the table. He had this app on his phone that automatically recorded calls, including with Preston. The recordings were damning. Conversations about moving money, discussions about other accounts they targeted, jokes about their wives being too stupid or too trusting to notice. In one particularly chilling exchange, they laughed about a retired schoolteacher whose entire pension they had drained. Her name is Dorothy Patway, Natalie said. Taught 3rd grade for 40 years. They took everything. That conversation led to another revelation. Natalie had been contacted by 5 other women, all connected to the scandal in various ways. Some were wives of co-conspirators. Others were victims whose husbands' retirement accounts had been looted. We organized a meeting at my house the following week. 7 women gathered in my living room on a Thursday night. We ranged in age from 23 to 68, united by our connection to this web of financial crime and emotional violence. There was Beverly Shin, whose husband's entire 401k had vanished. Valerie Williams, whose husband had been Cameron's partner before the firm collapsed. Linda Martinez, who discovered her husband facilitated the money laundering. We aren't just victims, I said, opening the meeting. We are witnesses. We have information that can expand this investigation and make sure everyone involved is held accountable. Beverly nodded firmly. I've been documenting everything for months. My husband thought I didn't understand finances because I teach elementary school. He was wrong. Over wine and carefully organized evidence, we built our case. Each woman contributed pieces, recorded conversations, suspicious documents, financial records that didn't add up. Valerie had emails showing the crime dated back 5 years. Linda had photographs of meetings that supposedly never happened. They thought we were decorations, Linda said, her voice steady with controlled anger. Pretty things to show off at parties while they built their empires on theft. They never imagined we were paying attention. By the end of that night, we had enough additional evidence to significantly expand the federal investigation. Our group chat became a command center for accountability. Each woman committed to ensuring justice reached beyond the main conspirators. As I cleaned up after everyone left, I found a sticky note Natalie had left on the kitchen counter. They called us trophy wives. Let's show them what trophies are really made of. Solid gold and impossible to break. I kept Natalie's note in my kitchen drawer. A small reminder of the solidarity we had built out of shared devastation. 9 months had passed since that first meeting, and today we would sit together again, but this time in a federal courtroom for Preston's sentencing. The courthouse stood against a harsh February sky in Chicago, its stone columns looking like prison bars. I arrived early, wanting to review my victim impact statement one last time. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from fear, but from the weight of speaking for so many who had been silenced by shame and confusion. The courtroom filled gradually. Josephine arrived wearing black, her face composed but aged by months of revelations about the son she had raised. Behind her, the other women from our group walked in. Beverly, Valerie, Linda, Natalie, and 3 others who had joined us as the investigation broadened. Haley wasn't there too close to her due date to travel, but she had sent her own written statement for the judge to review. When they brought Preston in, the orange jumpsuit had replaced his tailored suits, and federal custody had worn away his carefully maintained exterior. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, the confidence that once commanded rooms reduced to something hollow. His eyes scanned the gallery until they found mine, holding my gaze for a moment before I looked away. Dr. Audrey. The prosecutor addressed me when it was my turn. You may deliver your statement. I stood up, my heels clicking against the courtroom floor with the same rhythm they had when leaving Jonathan's penthouse that night. The podium felt solid beneath my hands as I began. Your Honor. I am not here to speak about the money Preston stole, although the damage extends to dozens of families. I am here to speak about the theft that doesn't appear on financial ledgers. The systematic destruction of trust disguised as a marriage. Preston shifted in his chair, his handcuffs making a small metallic clinking sound. For 5 years, I was married to a man who treated cruelty as entertainment, who publicly humiliated me at social gatherings, then gaslit me into believing I was too sensitive when I objected. I found hidden receipts in his home office jewelry, designer bags, spa treatments. Gifts bought but never given to me, kept as trophies of deception. While he told me we needed to budget more carefully, Josephine made a small sound, pressing a tissue to her eyes. Those same receipts were filed alongside documentation for Haley's apartment, as if betrayal was just another business expense to be categorized and archived. He kept spreadsheets, Your Honor, actual spreadsheets tracking his lies, his affairs, his stolen money with the same precision he used to track our household expenses, all while telling me my purchases of surgical equipment were excessive. I looked directly at Preston then, watching him shrink into himself. At a party, in front of colleagues and friends, he told me he would rather kiss his dog than kiss me. That I didn't meet his standards. The room laughed as my marriage ended publicly, turned into entertainment for people who knew about his affairs, his theft, his complete moral bankruptcy, but said nothing because it was more fun to watch me in the dark. The judge leaned forward slightly, his expression grave. The financial crimes destroyed retirements and futures, but the emotional violence he wielded destroyed something deeper. The ability to trust, to feel safe in one's own home, to believe that love means something more than performance and possession. He didn't just steal money. He stole years of my life, my confidence, my faith in partnership. That theft has no restitution value. I returned to my seat as others gave their statements. Dorothy Patway, the retired teacher, spoke about losing her entire pension. Jonathan's father described the betrayal of trusting his son's best friend. Haley's written statement was read aloud, detailing workplace predation and abandoned promises. When the judge finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of everything he had heard. Mr. Preston, the federal sentencing guidelines suggest 5 years for your financial crimes. However, the aggravating factors here, the breach of fiduciary trust, the exploitation of marital assets, the systematic nature of your deception, warrant an upward departure from those guidelines. I sentence you to 7 years in federal prison. The gavel came down with finality. As the guards prepared to lead him away, Preston turned to me, mouthing words that looked like, I'm sorry. But I was already turning away, reaching for Natalie's hand, then Beverly's, creating a chain of women who had survived similar devastation and found strength in shared truth. Josephine approached me as we left the courthouse. Audrey, what did he say in there? I never understood what he put you through. I failed you as a mother-in-law, and I am deeply sorry. That night, my townhouse filled with the same women who had gathered months earlier, but the atmosphere had shifted from mourning to something resembling hope. Natalie arrived with champagne bought with funds from Justin's seized assets, a detail that made us all smile grimly. To justice, Beverly raised her glass. To survival, Valerie added. To never being silent again, Linda concluded. We shared updates about our new lives. Natalie was back in school, pursuing the law degree she had abandoned when Justin convinced her they didn't need 2 careers. Beverly had started a foundation, helping elderly victims of financial fraud. Valerie was dating again slowly, carefully, but with hope. I got a letter from Haley, I announced, pulling it from my purse. They gathered around as I read it aloud. She was 8 months pregnant now, planning to raise the child on her own with her parents' support. She was also writing a book about predatory workplace relationships, asking if I would write the foreword. I want to call it Standards, the letter explained. Because men like Preston are always talking about standards, while possessing none themselves. The bitter irony wasn't lost on any of us. As the night wound down and the women began to leave, every departure was accompanied by long hugs and promises to maintain our monthly dinners. We had become an unlikely family, united by betrayal but defined by our resilience. Natalie was the last to leave, pausing at my door. You know what struck me most about your statement today? You didn't just expose what he did, you exposed who he truly was. There's something powerful in that kind of truth. After she left, I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in federal custody, Preston was beginning his 7-year sentence. Somewhere in Michigan, Haley was preparing for motherhood. And somewhere in this city, other women were living with similar secrets, similar shame, similar confusion about love versus control. I thought about the woman I had been at Jonathan's party, standing frozen while strangers laughed at my humiliation. She felt like someone I used to know but barely remembered now. In her place was someone harder, perhaps, but also clearer. Someone who understood that real strength wasn't about enduring cruelty, but about exposing it completely and unapologetically. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jonathan's former penthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floors that had witnessed my public humiliation exactly 1 year ago. The realtor, an energetic woman named Beth who didn't know the history of the space, gestured enthusiastically toward the view. The seller is highly motivated, she said, her voice echoing in the empty rooms. The bankruptcy trustees want to sell it fast for half the original purchase price. It's an incredible opportunity. I walked over to the exact spot where I had stood frozen, while Preston compared me to a dog, running my hand along the cold glass. The balcony doors were open, and I could see the space where the couples had danced that night. The same marble, the same walls, but stripped of the furniture and the pretense. It felt smaller somehow, less intimidating. The HOA fees are reasonable for a property of this caliber, Beth continued, checking her tablet. And with your pre-approval amount, you could easily— I'm going to pass, I said quietly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Beth looked confused. But you haven't even seen the master suite, or I don't need to own this space to know I've already conquered it. I turned away from the window, taking one last look at the empty room. Some victories don't require possession. Sometimes walking away is the true triumph. As the elevator descended, I felt lighter with every floor we passed. I didn't need to turn that penthouse into something else. My transformation had already happened without needing to claim that specific piece of real estate. 2 weeks later, my article appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, titled When Success Blinds: High-Performing Professionals and Intimate Deception. It examined how career-focused individuals, particularly in medicine and law, frequently miss the red flags of emotional and financial abuse in their personal relationships. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My hospital email filled with messages from other doctors, lawyers, executives, mostly women, but some men too, sharing their own stories of how professional success had made them targets for partners who viewed their achievements as something to exploit rather than admire. Harvard Medical School reached out first, inviting me to speak at their conference on physician wellness. Then Johns Hopkins, Stanford, and dozens of other institutions. Every lecture revealed the same pattern. Accomplished professionals so focused on their careers that they had explained away red flags as stress, dismissed cruelty as tough love, and rationalized exploitation as partnership. Your article saved my marriage, a young resident told me after a lecture in Chicago. Not because it helped me fix it, but because it helped me realize there was nothing to fix. I had been doing CPR on something that died years ago. That phrase, doing CPR on something already dead, had resonated with so many readers that it had become the unofficial title of my talks. 3 months after the article was published, I was in my parents' backyard in Madison, Wisconsin, watching my dad blow out 70 candles on a cake my mother had spent 2 days perfecting. The same relatives who had attended my wedding with Preston were here, but the atmosphere was different now, lighter. Nobody was pretending anymore. I never liked him, my Aunt Patricia announced after her 3rd glass of wine. His handshake was too firm, like he was trying to prove something. You said he seemed charming, my mother reminded her. I said his teeth were very white. That's not the same thing. Everyone laughed. And I realized this was the first family gathering where Preston's absence felt like a presence worth celebrating rather than avoiding. Audrey, sweetheart, my dad called out. Come here. There's someone I want you to meet properly. Benjamin Carter stood near the garden my mother cultivated religiously, looking surprisingly comfortable in jeans and a casual button-down instead of his usual federal prosecutor attire. We had developed an unexpected friendship over the months of trial prep, built on mutual respect and absolutely zero romantic undertones. Your dad invited me, Benjamin explained, looking slightly embarrassed. He said I needed to try your mother's potato salad before I could claim I understood the Midwest. And? I asked. Life-changing? He admitted. I might need the recipe as evidence. My dad beamed, clearly pleased with his matchmaking attempt, despite my repeated explanations that Benjamin and I were strictly friends. What my dad didn't understand, what most people didn't understand, was how valuable that friendship was. Benjamin treated me as an equal. He sought my opinion on cases involving financial crimes against spouses. He never once suggested my strength was intimidating or my success excessive. He called yesterday, Benjamin mentioned quietly as my dad got distracted by my sister's kids arriving. Preston is appealing the sentence. Let him, I said, watching my mother fuss over Abigail's children. Appeals require new evidence. He only has the same old lies in a different order. 6 months later, I was in an operating room prepping for one of the most delicate surgeries of my career. The 7-year-old daughter of Senator Cynthia Walsh needed a complex valve repair, the kind of procedure that required absolute precision and steady hands. 7 hours later, I emerged from surgery to find the senator waiting with tears in her eyes. You saved her life, she said, gripping my hands. How can I ever repay you? I was just doing my job, I replied. The same response I gave to every grateful parent. No, she said firmly. This is more than a job. This is a gift. Have you ever considered? I'm forming a committee on healthcare access reform in D.C. We need voices like yours. People who understand both the human cost and the practical realities. I thought about the offer over the following weeks. It would mean less time in surgery, more time in Washington, D.C., less direct healing, more systemic change. The kind of opportunity Preston would have killed for the prestige, the power, the proximity to influence. But I wasn't Preston. I no longer needed external validation to know my worth. Standing in my office, looking at the acceptance letter for the committee position, I thought about that woman on the dance floor. The one who leaned in for a kiss and received public humiliation instead. She had been so desperate for connection that she ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every moment of cruelty disguised as humor. That woman had needed to be destroyed for this one to emerge. Preston's cruelty hadn't broken me. It had broken the shell I didn't know I was living in. His public rejection forced me to reject the life I was accepting, the shrinking I was normalizing, the cage I was decorating instead of escaping. I signed the committee acceptance letter with the same steady hands that had saved the senator's daughter, that had packed Preston's boxes, that had held the microphone at countless lectures where I told the truth about marriages that looked perfect on the outside but were crime scenes on the inside. The woman who stood frozen on that dance floor was gone. In her place was someone who understood that real power didn't come from being chosen or validated or included. It came from choosing herself, validating her own worth, and including her own voice in conversations that mattered. Some words hurt, others heal. But the truest words, the ones that cut the deepest, are the ones we finally say to ourselves, I deserve better. I am enough. I choose me. If this story of calculated revenge resonated with you, hit the out her phone at the party and started revealing those forensic audits, watching Preston's arrogant victory turn into complete devastation. What was your most satisfying moment?